right. Well, hello, everyone. I'm sure people are just now starting to hop on. We're so excited to have you here today. I'm here with some amazing leaders and engineers, and we're going to be talking about some really exciting things. But first, I'm going to start out with a little bit of a teaser. So at some point in the last year, someone on this call found out about a CDN problem from a customer tweet. So not from their monitoring stack, not from an alert, but from a customer tweet, which I think is a lot of people's worst nightmare, right? So today we're going to talk about why that's still happening today in 2026 and what the architecture actually looks like to stop it. But first, we're going to do a little round of intros. So that way you know who is on this call and what everyone's background kind of is. So we're going to start out with Osmar. Osmar, if you want to introduce yourself in a few sentences and let everybody know what you do.
Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Osmar Bento. I work as a solutions architect for media entertainment, specialized in direct-to-consumer and streaming.
Awesome. Happy to have you here. Rory?
Hey, Jess. Hey, everyone. Welcome aboard. My name is Rory. I am based in a very hot southeast corner of the UK. My background is the last 15 years or so as a product manager and a GTM leader, always working with customers on solving their internet-facing challenges. So things around performance, things around security, streaming, e-commerce, travel and hospitality, these sorts of customer segments. Yeah, as I said, I started out in product, and a lot of the challenges I saw, particularly pertaining to this call 15 years ago, are actually still prevalent today. So excited to chat with you further. And I should say where I work today as well, actually. So I'm director of partnerships at Hydrolix. We are co-hosting this with yourself, Jess, GlobalDots, and AWS. Super excited to have everyone jump aboard and to dive into the content.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Rory. All right, Eduardo, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be in this round, and thank you for joining. I'm Eduardo. I'm a senior sales engineer and enterprise security architect. And over the past decade, we at GlobalDots have collaborated with leading web performance and security vendors, delivering state-of-the-art deployments for high performance, availability, and security. And in that sense, we're here to talk about observability. And yeah, it's a pleasure to be in this round. Thank you.
Awesome. And Christopher?
Hi, everyone. I'm Christopher Jen. I'm at AWS in a part of London that's AC'd in our wonderful office. So Rory, next time we should meet in person. I'm go-to-market for edge services at AWS. That's our CDN and WAF and perimeter protection. So I was really excited when Rory asked us to have a conversation around, what's happening in this space and, and I'm moving to a role around agentic. And I think that is transforming a lot of how we look at how to manage all of this infrastructure. So Jess, really excited to be here. Thanks so much.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here as well. As everyone here can see, we have some amazing people I'm going to bring up and put in the hot seat. Everybody here has tons of experience working with amazing companies. And a lot of us, I guess, don't have air conditioning. So I guess Christopher's the lucky one here that has the best crispy air conditioning. It's really hot in Europe right now. Okay. So first, we're going to talk about some of the operational realities. And I'm going to bring Eduardo up into the hot seat. So Eduardo, when something goes wrong with CDN infrastructure in an enterprise, how does the team typically find out about it?
So mostly what we see is, more reactiveness than being proactive and preventing, right? We see a lack of real-time and holistic observability. And I mean holistic because, we have to ingest data from all sources that we can get so we can correlate events and get a proper visibility into what might be causing any kind of issue, right? So we can see spikes that can be caused by a marketing campaign if you're kind of working on an e-commerce, or if you have an inventory that is kind of very limited, like, flight tickets or and other sorts of tickets, right? It can be caused by inventory scraping or AI scraping and that kind of source, right? So we do see sometimes infrastructure team, the security team, like pinging everyone and being more reactive, right? And in this sense, the real-time observability is, you should see the events as soon as they hit your deliveries and security stack, so you can, and the more information you have, the better, right? Because then you can really better infer the cause behind it, and that's really important, because you don't want to block your legitimate customers, but you want to keep the bad guys out.
Yeah, I love what you said too about being proactive versus reactive. I feel like all companies are trying to move from being reactive to proactive, especially when you're dealing with large amounts of data. So I think the interesting thing here is that we have the data, the visibility exists, but teams don't have time to actually act. So how common is that across your multi-CDN customers?
Very common, right? Because if you're talking about a multi-platform delivery stack, right? Each stack delivers or logs data with different fields and has different rule IDs and things that they keep in the logs, right? So it's also very important, to kind of aggregate and normalize everything, right? So that and the more you know, the better at the end of the day, right? So it's a fairly complex problem, right? Because if you leave analysis at each of these platforms isolated in silos, you miss the bigger picture. And at the end of the day, you then miss some crucial information back to properly, right? You don't want to hurt your business by for instance, when seeing a spike, blocking those requests, right? Because it might be really legitimate customers. If there's an event, or if there's actually nothing happening, it could be simply a scraping that could be close to bringing your infrastructure down, right? So it's important to act as soon as possible with the most information that you can have at hand, right?
Yeah, totally. Thanks for clarifying that for all of us. And a little side note, if you're watching right now and you have any questions, we would love it if you could throw some questions in the Q&A. We're going to be pulling up some questions and answering them live. So if anything's on your mind, if there's anything you want us to cover, please put it in the Q&A chat. All right, so now I'm going to bring up Christopher to the hot seat. So even if an alert does properly fire, someone has to actually decide whether or not they want to trust it to act on it. Have you seen that at AWS?
Yeah, I think we have a lot of alert fatigue in one of it, right? And so there's a lot of signal, and you're trying to find the signal to noise ratio. So that's one of like the challenges I see customers have. Across EMEA, I've also seen like some of the teams have reduced headcount. And so they're trying to do more with the same amount of people with more noise coming in. There also is a topic around cost. Maybe I can't have all the signal because of cost. And so then, WAF and, the security, there's a lot of signal gets emitted, but they have to make decisions, a cost benefit analysis of what do I do? So I think there is that whole thing and around, it's just too much to handle. And I went to a customer this week where they said, by the time when we get a new signal coming in, to analyze, to make it happen, takes about 6 hours for someone to analyze and do that and put the rule in place. And we're moving to a place where our adversaries are moving at machine speed, and we have a 6-hour window, and we have many signals. It is kind of like a snowball rolling into some of the customers we have. And obviously there's things we're doing, and that's why we're talking about this. What can we do in this space?
Yeah, so digging into that a little bit more, how do you balance flagging the right thing at the right time quickly, but not having too many false positives to where nobody wants to trust the alerts anymore? How do you find that balance?
I think it's that the trust of the signal, right? Kind of, using as much tooling as you can to help like filter out that. Obviously, we need humans in the middle of this kind of loop. And yeah, that's where I think it's really important. Like, just going into straight logs and assuming that you're going to have to build all that tooling yourself is just not sustainable in where we're moving towards.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I'm kind of hearing like two themes so far. Visibility, we have to see what's happening, but then there's also the trust element too. We have to be able to trust what's happening and trust these alerts. But now I want to dig in a little bit more into the data. So Rory, you spent 5 years leading go-to-market for AWS Edge Services before joining Hydrolix. What were CDN customers consistently struggling with on the data side there?
Yeah, I can actually go back further than that. So when I started as a product manager at Level 3 Communications, which was, I was a product manager for ASN 3356, the biggest network in the world. It was an amazing place to learn about the internet. And really what we need to work backwards from here is the internet. Like the internet is the enabler for the fourth industrial revolution. The internet is the thing which allows businesses to build direct-to-consumer models and to build new experiences at pace. Like that's our life now, the internet. And we're used to taking it for granted, but it's a non-deterministic thing. It carries no SLA, and it's a critical dependency for everyone. So and it's also, by the way, connects to X billion users, and X billion machines, and X billion vulnerabilities. So your front door to your business just became exponentially harder to understand and to monitor and to visualize and to conceptualize even. So when I joined as a product manager at that company, like, as I say, 10 years ago, we had just built a massive Hadoop cluster infrastructure to aggregate all of the real-time telemetry that the CDN was generating and put it into a form factor that the customer could consume. So deliver it back to the customer, say, here's all of your real-time telemetry. This is what you asked for. And indeed, all customers at that time were just screaming for, give me more visibility into what's going on, into what they all perceived to be quite a black box, which was their delivery network, which they were critically dependent on. And I saw something super interesting all that time ago when I had lots of hair and looked much younger and healthier. And that was, we provided all of that telemetry. I've got one specific customer in mind, a large French broadcaster. They had a major event coming up. It was super critical for them. It was a football match. It was going to be watched by 1/3 of the population of France. Everyone who's responsible for delivering that event knows that 2-hour window is the most critical time for you to understand if your application is working as it should be. And we did all of the prep work. We worked with an observability provider at the time who was super respected, did a lot of great work in the APM space. Customer was happy. We were happy. We then turned on the log streaming for that event, and I got a cascade of alerts from the account team, the partner, the customer, all saying it isn't working, like everything's slowing down. The signal is becoming not even too much. It doesn't exist anymore because the infrastructure is struggling to keep up with this amount of data that's landing in a centralized spot. So I learned then, and I kind of dug into, obviously after that event, we worked with the customer to understand why did that happen? It's because the amount of data that we were trying to deliver to that observability provider was like an order of magnitude, like 100x greater than anything they were used to when they looked from the perimeter back to the application core. And I learned then, oh, this is like a real blind spot then. If all of these teams are responsible for monitoring the path of the journey, which is your application perimeter to the user, which is a pretty critical point, no one's got a good solution there. And then indeed, in the intervening 10 years, I've been on so many trouble ticket threads, and I've been trying to dig into various issues. There's always a point in the thread where someone says, I wish we had the data. And that's the critical point. So I wish we had the data is the thing that everyone struggles with, whether it's around perimeter security, whether it's around media streaming, which Osmar is an expert in, whether it's around just understanding your user experience. The data exists, as Chris said, and as Eduardo said before me. The problem is no one could cost efficiently or indeed operationally scale to meet an internet-facing data workload. That is where there's a lot of good stuff, but everyone's had to learn an anti-pattern of like joining up the dots or filling in the gaps in the perspective that you threw away by sampling or whatever it might be.
Wow, well, that was really insightful. So thank you for sharing that. I want to also kind of dig in a little bit with Christopher on this as well. So when you're advising AWS Edge customers on building agentic operations, what data constraints keep coming up? And is it kind of the same problem that Rory was describing?
Yeah, it just amplifies now. So I think we all know, if you're following the token maxing, and token's not free anymore, right? You're going to be charged. We kind of get unlimited plans in a while, and so when you have agents that are really good at clustering and analyzing a lot of data, and if they have to go and look at all this data, and if they don't first, if it's sampled, then they're getting the full picture, right? So they make the wrong decision. So you're not getting the full power of what an LM can do. And then also, if it has to, because it doesn't maybe have context, right? It doesn't know how to join all of this data together. Then you're wasting time for it to relearn the data, and it can't do it at that pace. So what we're saying and what we're telling, agents have tooling. Those tools should be, let's say, MCP servers, and that MCP server should really know the data. Don't have the agent itself try to relearn the data on the fly, because that's not going to be a great use of that time. And so that is around the data problem. And I think as we advise customers to develop these agentic behaviors around how do you get repeatability, right? How do you evaluate as you build the agent, and now a new model comes up, how do you make sure it acts the same way, cost, all of that adds on top. But I do think the agentic way of solving some of these problems is a way to solve the resource constraint. It can run 24 hours a day, right? It could look at, it also has a memory function, which again is all around the data, right? So if you don't have good data going in, just like the traditional, you don't have good data in, your decisions or your outcomes will be based on the wrong assumptions. So that's why I'm here, is because we can't build agentic without a proper data foundation.
Sounds like even after all these years, garbage in, garbage out is still just as relevant, if not more today. We have to have good data for sure. So we've kind of seen a little bit of these insights so far. I now want to pull in Osmar. So does that kind of match with what you're seeing with M&E customers trying to build agentic workflows as well? Can you highlight some of those data issues that you're seeing on your end?
Yeah, it perfectly matches what I see in the M&E space. And I think the interesting thing is that sometimes we expect that agents would be solving the data structure problem, or that the agent will be kind of creating the data, analyzing that information, and somehow understand what is there. But the same true for data analytics still holds here, right? So we still have to have like a good data ingest, a good data collection side, and then we go to the data processing side, and then to the data storage, right? So in the data process is where we see some opportunities, because there, like right there, we can start, it's a way of triggering their agents. So we can do some anomaly detections, and then this is kind of a way of triggering the workflow. When we go for creating agents, and I love the concept from Anthropic, that they say that we have to think as an agent. So when we are developing and creating those agents to analyze the data, we actually have to go there, understand what is there. And I think it's the same questions that applies for creating dashboards would apply for creating an agent, right? For, in this case, for data analytics. So we still have to ask, like, what we need to see, what is the structure that we have to have, like what is the decision that we want to support. And so for media entertainment customers, we still have to go for different perspectives of the data to then understand. So at the end, the agent can only operate as well as the data foundation behind them can be.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love what you said about it's like building a dashboard. I'm seeing a lot of trends where data analysts and data practitioners are having to invest a lot more time in building agents, giving them the knowledge, the context, and the right data, instead of just, building dashboards nowadays. So that's a cool transition I'm excited about in the data space. So from what we've seen so far, we know we definitely need a good data layer to support all of these agentic workflows. And this is an architecture decision, not just a quick tooling swap. So let's dig in a little bit more into what that might look like. So Rory, could you describe what the agentic workflow looks like when the data infrastructure is right?
Yeah, absolutely. There's something Osmar said that I love there from the Anthropic perspective is, we need to think like an agent. And I love that whole trend of like agentic being the silver bullet, or, the magic pill that makes all data challenges go away because agents are clever. This is what when I extend that to like where we're going, agents are going to do things that humans can do today, and we want them to do them more efficiently and with a better output, a better quality bar, right? I read recently that an equivalent, like, it's a little bit abstract, but an equivalent sort of data load, if you thought about the human brain, every second we take in 14,000 pieces of information. So each human brain is taking in a massive amount of data every second if we take it into this abstract. And how do we build intelligence, right? It is memory and it is facts. What is education built on? Facts. How do we become more evolved as a civilization? It all relates back to our foundation of knowledge and our foundation of facts. And this is exactly, to Osmar's point, how we need to think about agents. So if we're building an operational agent, which we want to do meaningful things to improve the quality of experience we offer to our users, or if we want them to do reliable things around restricting or monetizing access to our web resources, which is kind of what this whole space is about. If we strip away facts, if we strip away knowledge, access to knowledge from those agents, what will happen? They will not be as intelligent as we would like them to be. So your key challenge here is, and this is where I also speak a little bit to the anti-patterns of the last 10 years. The last 10 years, and we spoke a lot already about signal and noise. The human brain takes in a massive amount of noise. It's clever enough to distill that into signal. What we did as engineers, we had no cost-efficient or operational substrate that could take in a massive amount of facts at internet scale. So we said, let's get really good at building around the blind spots. Let's get as efficient as we can be with 1% of the information. This is not the way that we build a data foundation in the agentic era, because an agent will look at those workarounds and say, I don't understand why you would do that. If you just gave me the information, I could do it much quicker. So this is the key shift, I think, in operational telemetry that will inform the next 5 years. How can you think about the human brain and the amount of information you can take in, and how can you make that like a technical and economic feasible thing for a set of centralized infrastructure to offer you? And that is where, there's a whole range of inputs to that. So there's the amount of horsepower that you need on the processing side, and the public clouds have obviously made massive bets on that. But then there is also this idea that, again, if you thought about a cost constraint on your intelligence, if you went, I won't have that 99% of foundational knowledge because I can't afford it, you wouldn't get to where you want to be in terms of your level of intelligence. So where we're coming from and where we're going to in terms of what Hydrolix is building for. Hydrolix comes from a place where, when it was invented, the observability platforms at the time, they did things like they thought about a context-specific analytics job. So they tightly coupled storage and compute. And that meant that when you needed to answer a question, a big complex question with a lot of high cardinality factors to it, you loaded everything into an environment. You pulled something out of like a static place and into an active place. And you intentionally asked a set of tools to run a load of compute around that, and you got back the output of that analytics exercise. Again, think about an agent won't do things because it's Monday morning and their calendar says, well, they will, but this isn't the most optimal way of doing it. They won't do things based on like those job roles. What we want them to do is asynchronously figure stuff out. So asynchronously, you'd need to have access to an environment which could scale up and down independently in the key cost variables that go into a data platform. You'd need storage to be completely decoupled from compute. You'd need things like ingest and query to not share the same infrastructure. You'd need them to be able, again, to scale up and down, because Again, one of the reasons why we threw away our knowledge on the data side is because it was anytime we needed to do something, we had to scale up and down the whole environment as one kind of monolith. So Hydrolix is approaching this problem, one, from the perspective of decoupling, which means that then storage becomes something that you can scale in a S3 compatible model with highly efficient patented compression. So taking raw data and reducing it by a factor of 95% and storing it in S3 instantly transforms the amount of data you can keep, the amount of facts you can keep. And then here's the really important thing as well. When it comes to accessing that data, again, I described the old observability model where let me go into an environment, let me scale up that environment on demand, let me ask questions within that environment. Everyone on the call so far has spoken about context. Context from this system, this system, this system. And you cannot be prescriptive about saying my knowledge, my intelligence lives within my walled environment. So this is another huge piece of what Hydrolix is thinking about from an architectural perspective. How can you make the data as interoperable with as many tools as possible? So we started off by building Splunk connectors and by building Kibana proxy services and all the places where people naturally ask questions of data today. But then when MCP came about, it opened up this whole extra level of, oh, this is no longer an interface. This is a chain of intelligence, which you can orchestrate and you can build using amazing tools like Agent Core, Bedrock Agent Core in AWS, and you can pull in third-party LLMs to start putting the questions part of that piece to a machine, or the operational kind of efficiency part of that picture to a machine. So that's like a long-winded way of saying retain all of your facts, otherwise you'll be stupid as an agent, and make it possible that the range of access is not like super. It's not like a monetized thing, you know. Instead, it's your data. It should be open for you to use, and make it as interoperable with as many systems, as many contexts as possible. Allow that ability to correlate across systems, and that is what MCP has really unlocked. Take MCP server 1, MCP server 2, and give me both of those pieces of context back in a correlated way.
Yeah, that was excellent. Thanks for that. I think context is going to be the word of the year for 2026. I'm hearing it all over the place as well. Now, Eduardo, can you walk me through what that same workflow looks like at a GlobalDots perspective? Are you kind of thinking about that the same way?
Yeah, absolutely, right. So continuing on what Rory was mentioning, we need to get more and more data and have access to it in real time, to as much data as possible, right? And from every source that is out there that we can ingest from, right? We see that need across big organizations having different delivery and security stacks, right? And continuing into what Rory and my colleague panelists were mentioning, right? A few years ago, we were kind of okay with sampling and just, taking away source A and B, but in this day, right, we need more and more data because we're also building our own MCP components and applications on top of the data that we receive, right? So sampling and not keeping the data long enough is becoming problematic, right? And ignoring sources or not or failing sources to give us the data that we need in the way that we need becomes problematic from a perspective of security or performance, right? So we see all the time also when we integrate solutions like Hydrolix, we can suddenly see spikes that were left unnoticed or give answers to infrastructure teams that were raising the flag and saying we are scaling up because we have more requests coming in and we don't understand really why. We can now also answer that question, right? Which will give us more and more information, allowing us also to prepare for further campaigns, right? Or to kind of malicious way of requesting, right? We're talking a lot about the agentic AI, but we see also a lot of AI crawling that sometimes goes at limited inventory or causes infrastructure stress, right? And you really need to see these things in real time and take proper actions, right? That's basically how we see it. And then, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. For the people watching live right now, we're going to do one more question, and then we have a really exciting demo coming up. So if you have any questions, definitely put those in the chat below. So Christopher, if an agent is making real-time decisions on CDN infrastructure, what does responsible design actually look like?
Yeah. So this is an evolving space, but this is, I would say, here's some kind of tips on what we think. First of all, I think you want a human in the loop, right? So for explainability is really important for the business, and having a human in the loop allows you to make sure the blast radius, it make the wrong assumptions is a way to test out, right? Just like how you bring in an intern, right? You're not going to let the intern instantly go wild. Just like how these agents, it's important to kind of watch their work. And as you watch their work, there's a whole memorying and learning function. And that's where your agent gets smarter over time with the work it's doing. And as you go along, that's where you can then say, okay, maybe we want autonomous behavior, right? But I think there's still a lot to be gained from this analyzing, give me suggestions, and what I should do. In Agent Core, we launched guardrails. So this is a big part of like, okay, let's make sure we have the proper controls with these agents, even a proxy to make sure the output, it's not going to do things it's not supposed to be doing. There is another, big concept of like, we should have an agent monitoring this agent's output, right? Use an LLM to monitor that. And in terms of static rules, which LLMs produce, if you run it again the next time, you might have something else different. So those are kind of like things that you need to make. It is different in the way you look at it. You kind of put more controls around it, knowing that it may not have the same outcome every time. But that is also the creativity part of an agent, is how you look at maybe finding anomalies or threats, or you turn up or down the temperature, that the creativity part that you do want it to find, that be more, search it a little bit differently. So this is kind of some of the ways I would say I guide customers through this, how to think about your first agent in deployment.
That's awesome. Love the intern analogy there. You don't want to give your interns access to everything with no instructions or context. I'm going to say the context word one more time in this webinar. Got to add it in again. We're about to pivot over to Osmar for an amazing demo. I know I'm really excited to see this in action. That's what I'm most excited for. As he's kind of transitioning over and we add his screen up. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat.
All right, perfect. So I will walk through the demo. This is agentic operation. So basically the idea here is to create a pipeline where we can have like the whole observability for the media streaming pipeline, right? So in a classical media stream pipeline, we have the contribution, and then we have the content processing. We will have the distribution, which like basically is the CDN. And as Eduardo mentioned many times, this has this the perspective of a multi-CDN. And then the last component, which is really important, is the player, right? So the player would provide us more the content experience or the customer experience perspective. And then, so we basically have this connection, right? So when we go to the agentic workflow, basically we have this implementation, this architecture. The first component, it's basically El Captain, which is like our agent coordinator that is like responsible for dispatching the connections, reasoning, like basically performing the classical React, right, which is reasoning and act. So this is the responsibility of El Capitan. And here we have the connection of Agent Core Gateway. Agent Core Gateway is going to be our MCP connector. So for the clients, we can have a UI like we have here. And this UI is going to be using Strands Agent. So Strand Agent is going to be basically our SDK for communicating with El Capitan and the remaining agents. But we also have like the way connecting with Cloud Code or with Kiro, right? So it's like a direct interface, like a direct MCP interface throughout Agent Core Gateway. So we also have memory, of course. This works either for short-term memory within a session, right? So if you're discussing about a specific channel or a specific endpoint of the CDN, then we need to know kind of the context of this pipeline, and you can ask, or we can have like the alarm going further, and we keep this memory for short term. And there's also the long-term memory, which is basically the formation of patterns, right? So we want to keep that information in memory so we can understand if there's always a problem on Sunday mornings, right? So we can start keeping and forming this pattern. And then we have the different agents, right? So we have Media Connect, Media Live, and the media observability. So the media observability is where we have this connection with Hydrolix. Hydrolix is going to provide us all this perspective of the CDN and also the multi-CDN logs. And then we also have Mux as the SDK in the player to bring the perspective of the quality of experience, right? So in terms of a workflow, this is kind of the way the LL Captain receives the signals of the different agents. The most important thing here is kind of the flow, right? We do have the option of interacting with the agents using a kind of chatbot perspective, but the natural way is actually alarms and anomaly detection. So for alarms, it's basically, let's say, elemental media live. It's presenting some problems, and this is creating a alarm, and it goes to El Captain to then create a plan, analyze, see what is next, interacting with the agents, and then creating a root cause analysis. And for anomaly detection is the same. So for this, we have Apache Flink as our way of detecting anomalies. So basically, this is looking for throughput cliff, low buffer, starvation burst, right? And this is kind of in a small window. So for throughput, it's 10 seconds. For starvation, it's 30 seconds. And this is kind of triggering the workflow. And it goes to like the classical way of working with a coordinator, right? So creating a plan, then checking the many alarms that we have, go to evaluation, and then if you approve, it can also perform automatic actions, right? Like swap to another source, isolate this node of the CDN, swap the traffic. But most of the interactions is kind of a human in the loop. And the important thing here is that we want to provide this root cause analysis. So in pipeline, I have this view of the different channels. This is kind of a penalty box in the broadcast. So we have channel number 1, channel number 3, but those are actually channels that are presenting some alarms, right? And when we go to details, we can see here the analysis that was performed for all the either alarms or anomaly detection. Here we can click in each of the alarms and go for the root cause analysis. So what is the idea here? Take the classical 3 a.m. call that you receive from like the operational team saying that you have a problem. So what we are providing here is a way or enabling operational engineers to go faster, right? So instead of walking there and then doing the troubleshooting, going through logs, metrics, all the information should then understand what's happening, you actually will have this report, right? So when you start troubleshooting or performing action, you already have like the big picture. When we go to automation is basically the way that we coordinate the workflow. So here is kind of recreating a RAG, resource augmented generation database that is like instructing the agents how to behave. This is kind of the same concept that we have in operation, which is the run books. And the run books is kind of the flexibility here. So when we go to the agents, like El Capitan, you can ask, like, what is the overall health of the pipeline? And this is going to be creating like a broadcast action, triggering all the agents at the same time, because we need to investigate the whole pipeline. So this invoked Media Connect, Media Live, as well as Hydrolix, Mux, getting all the perspective, right? So when we go to Media Connect, here we can do simple things as listing all the channels that we have available, or for instance, describing a specific workflow in flow management to see like what is the health for this channel. When we go to Media Live, this is kind of one of the most interesting ones. In this workflow, it goes there, retrieves the thumbnail, like a group of 10 thumbnails. It goes to the pipeline of computer vision, analyze the pictures, and then brings you back this report. So the CDN, this is, you can check the performance of like the overall cache information, or check for errors, let's suppose. Let's check why the 403 is increasing in my CDN. And this is going to be bringing you like an analysis per edge location. You can also create graphics, like you can ask for create a graphic of the performance of the CDN per edge location, and this is going to bring you like all the information back. So I hope that this gives you a like idea of what is agentic intelligent operation. We will be sharing the GitHub. This project we are publishing in conjunct with Hydrolix to make sure that you have this reference like running on Agent Core with all the artifacts so you can start faster.
Well, that was amazing, Osmar. So thank you so much. It really put a lot of color into the things that we've been talking about throughout this webinar. And I think it'll be really awesome for engineering teams to do that root cause analysis and triage and figure out what's going wrong. Speaking of what can go wrong, Christopher, I'm going to pivot over to you. Can you walk the audience through what can go wrong and how responsible design can actually prevent it? I'm curious about the risks and mitigations here.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that could go wrong. Like, let's say, false positives, false negative, right? Or making the wrong decisions. Let's say the agent getting too much control. And so it's about the same things about developing proper applications, scope down, right? IAM, right? All of that still applies. And then tracking what it's doing.
Awesome. Well, that brings us to our time here. There's a few things that I know I'm taking away. First, the data layer is the constraint, not AI. We have to care about the data, garbage in, garbage out. Second, agents earn authority. And third, the business case is straightforward. So after this session, you can download the ebook. The link is going to be in the chat below. I've read it and I highly recommend it. So you definitely need to grab a copy. And if anything in this conversation sounded interesting to you or kind of resonated with some of the problems that you're having, you have 5 panelists here from Hydrolix, GlobalDots, and AWS who can help. So go reach out to them, grab the ebook, and go build something. And thank you so much, everybody, for joining.
Yeah, come build agents. Let's solve the problem.